What did Mike McCarthy have to say about Dak Prescott in the Cowboys minicamp press conference before they kick off practices? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, very stylish today. How you doing, buddy?
I'm trapped in my bedroom by myself as I'm trying to isolate from COVID. So I thought I'd at least dress up for all of you, wearing a nice sweater today. Even though it's sweltering in Texas right now. I'm
gonna need you to send me that link for that to get that sweater. That's a great sweater.
It's pretty nice. It's pretty nice. I'll definitely send you a link.
All right. So the Cowboys officially opened up minicamp on Tuesday. Although Mike McCarthy said it's basically an install and you're not going to get too much today from practice. But we do have some little nuggets to get to. We also have some Twitter questions. So let's go ahead and start with this. Dak Prescott, conversation today about can he run more in 2022? How is he looking? Mike McCarthy said he looked lean. This is some of the best shape he's been. He looks way more flexible. Do you buy that the Cowboys are actually going to run the ball more with Dak this year?
Best shape season, huh? We finally arrived. Even Mike McCarthy,
about 4 different players, I believe.
Even Mike McCarthy himself looked like he was in best shape of his life.
Yeah, I think he's getting a little leaner.
Yes, I actually do buy this one because the fact that you and I, for a while have discussed the fact that it's important that Dak be able to run the football when he needs to. It's an important part of this offense. I think it's especially important in the red zone where he just that extra element of a threat that Dak could run and cross the goal line. It adds an angle and an element to your offense in the red zone that is really, really difficult to defend and makes you a lot more dangerous. So I think that another year away from these injuries, another year away from the ankle injury, and then also the calf injury, hopefully we'll have kind of rejuvenated Dak's will to kind of take off and run and feel comfortable taking off and running. And we always kind of had hoped that, an off season away from this would kind of return Dak to some of that because it is such a great part of his game. And a dangerous part of his game that really kind of helps open things up a lot for this offense in the red zone, but also all over the field. So I do believe it because I think the Cowboys offense really needs it.
I think the part about him being more flexible and leaner was what got me excited, right? I thought he looked a little too muscle bound at times last year, and it just made him look clunky. And it might have been just trying to bulk up and I don't know, put on some more body armor. But I think quarterbacks are better.
He couldn't get away, so he had to bulk up. I think to be able to take some of those hits, probably.
Which he did. I mean, you watched some of those early season games, and he, especially like Tampa Bay, he got hit all the time. But one of the things that we've seen from some of the older quarterbacks in the league is as you kind of progress in your NFL career, it's better to get a little bit leaner and to be a little bit more flexible. And when you get hit, kind of just go spaghetti on him a little bit, right? Like Tom Brady is a perfect example of this, right? He's not muscle bound at all. He's super lean. It just gets me excited because I think that version of Dak is going to be a better player for the Cowboys.
I completely agree. I think the ability for him to get away, to just get a little bit of that speed back where, it threatens the angle on linebackers. I mean, I'm not asking him to run away from defensive backs, but hurt some of the angles on the linebackers as you're trying to get to that first down marker.
To me, it's not even necessarily the running part. It's you're in the pocket, right? Can you make one little quick movement just to dodge a linebacker and then throw the ball? Like those quick little tiny side steps. I thought he was good at last year because he's always been good at that. But if he can be a little bit quicker in the pocket, I think he'll avoid some sacks and he'll turn into big plays.
Yeah, he has always been very good at kind of just avoiding pressure and operating inside the pocket. But I do agree, like the ability to kind of peel out a little easier and kind of open things up in the passing game, once the play breaks down, that usually bears pretty good fruit for Dak whenever he's able to do that.
All right, there's another player that Mike McCarthy talked up in the press conference that I want your thoughts on, Landon, because I thought it was really interesting. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys about Blue Nile. Whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Blue Nile has simple online tools that let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. Blue Nile will then handcraft a perfect engagement ring, with each ring being one of a kind. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Cowboys listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement. Use promo code Locked On. That is promo code Locked On Plus. Every order is insured, ships free, and it arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Go to BlueNile.com to shop today. All right, Lana. Next player we need to talk about, Connor McGovern. Here is what Mike McCarthy had to say about Connor McGovern. He said, I think Connor has done an excellent job. I think, like anything, you control what you can control. We have so many players, and he's one of them, that have been here for the captains of the workouts. These guys have been here since February, and Connor has been one of those guys. So this is clearly the best shape he's been in. It's the strongest that he's been. The numbers that he has pushed, his body index, and all of those components are what you really look for. And he's maxed this time of year to get ready for competition. Do you buy that Connor McGovern is going to be part of this offensive line competition here in July and August?
I do, but I don't know that it's going to be at guard. I think it likely will be at center. I think they want Tyler Smith to win that left guard spot. I mean, I imagine that he is going to be good enough to take that left guard spot, especially since with the first round picks, often the tie goes to the runner, right? So,
Sure.
I do think that that the fact that they have tried it a little bit last year, the fact that they're continuing to try it this year, to play him at center or to get him snaps at center. Obviously, part of that could be just to kind of prep him for a role as an interior swing guy. That obviously could be a route that they're going. But another route that they could be going, because they've clearly shown a willingness to do this, is that they're trying to look for a replacement for Tyler Biadasz. They're trying to look for an upgrade there, and having someone with a little more girth like McGovern playing center, may be valuable. He felt undersized and underpowered at times, especially when he was playing left guard. But I think that if you're talking about him playing at center, in between someone like Tyler Smith and Zach Martin, now you're talking about a real steady kind of strong upfront presence that someone like Dak Prescott could really enjoy. So I do think that he will be part of the mix. I don't know that he's going to have the inside track to the left guard position like many of us thought before Tyler Smith got drafted.
Yeah, I still would be shocked if he is a week one starter unless there's an injury, right?
Sure.
But what I think the Cowboys really want him to do is take the swing interior job and just dominate that. Like, just be much better than Matt Farniak, be much better than Tyler Biadasz in that area. So, hey, if a situation happens like it did in week one where somebody tests positive for COVID or they're injured and he can step in and play well, I think that's probably what they're looking for. They just want him to be a really, really solid 6 offensive lineman for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the expectation. If he could get
and then play fullback,
a better. Yeah, I mean, definitely some snaps as tight end and fullback, and if he can get a push on some of these guys in the middle and push their starting spots, I don't think anyone's going to be upset about that. Like, you want to have that competition, and I agree. You mentioned Farniak; he's another guy that's been kind of mentioned about in that competition for the center spot. So I think that the idea is just to get. I think they felt like they had 3 interior guys last year, and they weren't as far as like backups they weren't sure exactly how they liked any of them. I think what they're trying to do this year is make sure that they like more than one of them.
Yes.
And that they want to make sure that they have depth there, not just, the first man off the bench, but actually pushing the starters, and then actually having some depth in the position, because as we saw, those spots get shuffled around a lot, and injury can take those offensive linemen, suddenly.
It's just not realistic in the NFL today, especially now that you have 17 games that your starting five is going to play all 17 games, right? It's just not going to happen. Injuries are going to strike. So you need to have that swing interior guy be ready to go. So I think the Cowboys obviously are encouraged. We're going into year 4 now. McGovern's been healthy for, 3 full years because he missed his rookie season with an injury. It's time for him to go. He might not win a starting job, but that's okay. I think he's going to have a lot of value being that first offensive lineman off the bench. And I'm not really joking about the fullback spot. Like, there's probably going to be 5 or 6 plays a game that he's on the field as a short yardage blocker.
Yeah, as a tight end, as a fullback, they kind of moved him around a little bit. Obviously, would not be surprised to see him catch a pass this year.
I really wanted somebody to ask Mike McCarthy, how's Connor's hands coming along?
Well, I mean, that he can't give away trade secrets, right? So he's probably keeping Connor McGovern's
really
time
funny,
in front of the
by the
jug
way.
machine quiet. It's like.
All right. One more quote from Mike McCarthy that I thought was really fascinating. You have to bear with me because it's a little long, but somebody asked him about CeeDee Lamb becoming the number one receiver on this team, and basically what is his definition of a wide receiver one? And I thought McCarthy had a really good answer. He said, I don't really have one. I'm not saying that sarcastically. I think it's important for all of your receivers. I like receivers to play multiple positions because I'm focused on beating the defense that's going to line up and double 2 of your top guys. So the ability to play inside and outside, I think, is part of the description or characteristics of being a number one receiver. I think like any premier player, whether you're talking about Micah Parsons or Aaron Donald, which, by the way, that's really funny that he talked about premier players being Aaron Donald and Micah Parsons. If you line up in one position, I think the targeting for the offense is a little easier. So I think clearly the ability to play inside and outside, and with CeeDee playing the slot last year and now taking the flanker position, that's when he has the flexibility to go along with a great skill set. I thought that was a really smart answer by McCarthy. What were your thoughts on it?
I think it's a very smart answer. I just don't know that it's an answer to the question that was asked. But I think it was. Yes, it gave us a lot of information, which is the more important thing. I think that it told us that the plan is about how they're going to move CeeDee around to try to beat what defenses are doing to them. I think what it did answer was kind of the the whole Linehan versus McCarthy kind of offensive philosophy, right?
Yes.
Of kind of not trying to force the ball to a player who's at one position all the time, and then trying to build your offense around how the defense reacts to that. More about trying to move around your best players and then operate them within the scheme to try to scheme them open to defeat the defenses that you're facing. So
I just, and maybe he saw this when they played the Cowboys, under Linehan, but like you can have a superstar receiver like Des Bryant at the peak of his game, and if you can send 2 guys and take him out of the game, it sounds like a win for your offense, but it's really not, because now your best player is not getting the ball. And we've seen this in Green Bay with Devonta Adams, or even before that with Jordy Nelson. They find ways to get their top receivers the ball, whether that is playing in the slot. So if you have a really good outside corner that can't play in the slot, there you go. You just created a mismatch. So to me, that's why if I had to guess, like, he views players like CeeDee Lamb, like the prototype number one receiver, because you could literally move them all around. You can have them take carries in the backfield. You can have them play in the slot, outside. We're just going to find ways to get our best player of the football.
Yeah, and I think that's it, right? Is that it's no use to have one good player who can be outside and dominate that way, because that's very easy to take away, no matter how dominant that player is. So the ability to move those guys around, to be able to scheme those guys open because of that player's versatility. And that was always the issue with Dez at times.
Oh yeah,
right?
And I love Dez, one of my favorite players of all time. Yes,
but the fact that you couldn't play Dez in the slot, I mean, it really limited his
Well,
usefulness at times, I think.
and not only that, but you also had a slot receiver that couldn't play outside.
That's right. Yeah.
So you
And
had kind of both of those. You couldn't move those guys around. Then you had Terrence Williams, who was not an X receiver and certainly not a slot receiver.
And so it became very easy to kind of scheme defensively. I mean, it was easy to predict what the offense was going to do. This offense, it's not that. This offense, it's game plan specific against what your defense is doing, and they're going to have solutions for what you like to do on defense. So, it's just a different philosophy, and I think for the Cowboys, especially for the way football is nowadays, it's the more modern way of thinking about attacking a defense.
Do you think last year, because of Amari and because of Gallup, they were a little bit too predictable? I mean, again, we should put this in context. They were still the number one ranked offense in the NFL, but do you think without Amari, without Cedric Wilson, they're going to be a little bit more unpredictable?
Yes, this is what I've been saying. I think the downside to having all those wide receivers, if there is a downside, is that you do become predictable because ultimately you have to feed all those guys. You've got to find a way to incorporate all of them because you're paying your number two wide receiver $20 million a year. You've got a first round wide receiver that you really, really like and you want to feed the ball. You've got another guy in Michael Gallup who you want to see if you can invest in him long term and you want to get him the ball down the field. That's a lot of mouths to feed and a lot of obligations for an offense that wants to be multiple and wants to be able to adjust based on what the defense is doing, not necessarily some kind of preconceived notion of what the offense should be doing. And I think that plays out when you watch how this team plays offense on a script versus off script. When this team has struggled at times playing with their scripted plays. They've struggled to get into games early. They've struggled to score points early in the game. It's when they've seen what the defense has done to them, and they're able to open up their offensive playbook a little bit and exploit what they've seen, that they've had the most success. When they're trying to force the ball to certain players or trying to serve too many masters in this offense, I think they really struggle. It's when they are opened up and free to, make the adjustments that are necessary, get the ball to who it's necessary in order to beat the defense, that this offense has its most success. And I think that's hopefully what they're trying to go for. They limited the amount of mouths that they have to feed. And then now they can be a little bit more flexible with their touches. They can be a little bit more creative week to week because they're not having to get Amari X amount of snaps, CeeDee X amount of slaps, Schultz X amount of slaps. Now they can really just truly be kind of free to take it as it comes.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think they're going to be a little bit more unpredictable, and I think that will make the offense. I don't know if it's necessarily going to make the offense better, but maybe in big games, when you're going against a really talented defense, they won't know exactly what's coming because you watched the 49ers game last year, the playoff game, and they had a really good beat on what Dallas was doing until we got to the fourth quarter when things started to turn into a little bit more of a frantic pace, and that's where Dak has always been really good.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I think that there's mounds of evidence of that, and I think that when you are open to kind of do what it takes to win, as opposed to feeling like you have to kind of meet these markers or meet these standards of we got to get X amount of touches to this player and that player, and instead are allowed to formation a team to death. If you want to run 7 plays of 12 personnel in a row because it's working and that's effective against that defense, you're not going to feel like you're obligated to get into 11 personnel just because you have these guys that you feel like you need to get touches for. So if they're truly going to a truly versatile, scheme versatile, formation versatile offense, that's when they've had a lot of success. If you go back and watch a lot of the early games, the stark difference between the number of formations, the number of personnel groups that they ran early in the season versus what they ran later in the season. Now, obviously, a lot of that's injuries, but the it's a stark difference in the amount of variety that they had in their offense early in the season versus what they had late.
I totally agree. All right, let's take one more quick break to tell you guys about BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, news, and odds, including this year's NBA Finals. We've got Game 6 on Thursday, the NHL Hockey Finals, Major League Baseball, and, of course, UFC. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, one quick Twitter question. We're going to get to some of these later in the week, but I thought this one was interesting. This one comes from @Jones's babysitter. He sent us some good questions before. It's a good Twitter handle. He wants to say he wants to know, give me some encouragement. How is this offseason with the Cowboys losing Amari Cooper, losing Cedric Wilson, not like the offseason where we lost Dez and Beasley? They just don't have a lot of hope going into this year. Now, before you answer that, I did want to point out, it feels like to me that excitement and enthusiasm surrounding the Cowboys is, I don't want to say an all-time low, but it seems low. Like,
Sure.
For example, even Mike McCarthy's press conference today, I don't know if you saw the little screenshot I grabbed, but there was only 100 people watching the press conference at noon Eastern time today. Compare that to some of the other ones that are going on right now, and you'll see 15, 16 times more viewers than that. I don't know. Are people just out on this Cowboys team, or are we just at a point where it's like, we don't care about what happens in June, July, August. We only care about what happens now in the playoffs, because we've seen this kind of thing happen before. We get excited in September and October, and then we just get let down in January.
What's the opposite of hype? Like what's anti-hype? This offseason.
Google it.
Yeah, like let's get a synonym for anti-hype. This offseason has been this kind of self-piling on, like, just trying to get through the feels. This has been kind of a negative feedback loop of Cowboys news, it feels like. And everyone has taken everything to heart, and everyone has taken everything as worst case scenario. And I think that, there have been things there's been news that is, could be spun as completely terrible. There's news that could be spun as very good. I think that the problem is that it's gotten to a point now that after the way the last season ended, and then the way that this offseason has gone, it's just been, Cowboys fans anti-hyping themselves, right? Like,
yeah.
They found a way to get upset about every single thing that's happening. And they've convinced themselves that this is just not something that they want to necessarily get hyped up about. I think all that's going to change. That it always does. It's just a little bit later in the year that it's happened this year. But I also think that I think there have been so many years when we've gotten so hyped, and I think that it produced very little. And then there's been years that where there's been no hype. I mean, look, where were we last year? I would love for everyone to just take themselves back like 1 year, and how we felt about this defense, and how we felt about Dak Prescott's potential coming off that injury. There was a lot of talent on this team, but there were a ton of question marks about a lot of different stuff. I honestly wonder if there aren't less question marks this year than there were last year. You didn't
Well, I mean,
know,
we can go through them. Like, last year we had there's a lot of them between Dak. We had Ezekiel Elliott coming off a bad season, which we could talk about him. The tight end position, right? Because Dalton Schultz was only proved it for kind of half a season. The defense in general was not very good.
Defensive line, the cornerback safety situation was dire from what we were talking about at this point last year. Look, the entire defense was an enormous question mark, and now we're talking like this could be a top 10 defense this year. So
I actually think I'd be a little disappointed if they only finished like 8 or 9 on defense this year. Like, they should be better than that, you would think, right?
I do. I mean, look, I think defense is always, candidate for regression, but I think that you could lose the number of turnovers that they have. like it could regress and you could still be a very, very, very good defense.
What I almost mean, like, yards per play, they should be
Sure.
better this year.
Yeah.
That's a little bit more repeatable than turnovers, which they're not going to
Absolutely.
have the same amount of turnovers. But if the yards per play can come down, be closer to what we saw in the second half of the season and kind of maintain over the whole year, they could be a very good defense. And really, my only big question on this team is, how quickly does Michael Gallup come back from his injury? Does somebody else kind of step up between that? And what's the status at left guard? Like, can they get competent play from that? If the answers to those are like Gallup is going to be back by week 4 and it's going to be normal Michael Gallup, and you're going to get, let's say, Connor Williams like play from your left guard this year, this team's going to win 10, 11, 12 games again.
There's lots to feel good about this team, despite what everyone may feel right now. They're going to play a very easy schedule next year. They still have a ton of talent. I think that people tend to forget still, this is still one of the youngest and most talented teams in the NFL. And as much as everyone wants to hate on Stephen Jones and the front office, which, look, I understand their ire, they're the ones who collected all these players. Mm-hmm. And many teams across the NFL would kill for a roster that the Cowboys have. So I understand that there's tons to be negative about. There's things that have happened this offseason that you may not disagree with, that I may not disagree with. But I also know that I have gone into these seasons feeling supremely confident in this team. I've gone into these seasons feeling that this team was going to be in a lottery pick for the top 10. I guess that doesn't happen in the NFL, but my point.
Yeah.
And neither really gives any kind of indication as to what ended up happening. So if you're looking for reasons for optimism, your reason for optimism is that the NFL has an oblong ball and the ball bounces weird. And that's not just a literal saying. That's a metaphoric one that applies to the entirety of the NFL.
Just really quickly, this is like a good way to kind of recap where the Cowboys are at least on the defensive side of the ball. At this time last year, it was clear. I mean, I don't even think it was close. Donovan Wilson was the best safety on the roster. And I think you could have made a case that he was their second best defensive
player. Yeah, or maybe defensive player. I mean, honestly.
Back. You might even be able to make a case going into last year that he was their best defensive back because Trevon Diggs missed a lot of time, was very up and down. I thought Donovan Wilson got better last year. I thought he improved. He improved his coverage. He improved what he could do in the box. And he's not even a starter. Like, we really haven't talked about him at all with this defense. And he's a 24, 25-year-old safety that we're not talking about because the Cowboys are just in such a better spot now on defense. And he's, instead of being, let's say, your 5th best defensive player, he might be your 15th best defensive player going into this season.
Yeah, I mean, the improvement on defense is marked. And I think that part of it was the fact that there was talent previously on this defense that was just not playing well with it in combination with the defensive scheme that was being played. So it was a kind of a perfect storm. A lot of these veteran players playing better football. You got a great injection of young talent. An inclusion of an elite player, an immediately elite player on your team in Micah Parsons. And it kind of a rising tide, raised all ships, and it made this defense suddenly kind of a juggernaut. And I do think that, again, the fact that there's so much rising young talent on this defense indicates that I think that they're going to be good again. This defense, I like I said, the regression is a thing, and it will happen, but that it can happen in one element of the defense while still having a very good defense. I think that is a possibility.
Two of these young defensive players are going to step up. Like we saw Trevon Diggs make a leap. Micah Parsons obviously was fantastic last year, but like somebody's going to get better, whether it's Osa, whether it's Gallimore, whether maybe it's Quentin Bohanna takes a huge step, or maybe it's Chauncey Golston or Israel Muhammad. Like, I'm just telling you, two of these guys are going to step up. And by the time we get to week 8, it's like, oh, there's not really a lot of holes on this defense, especially if Lawrence and Parsons and Diggs stay healthy. Yeah. It's going to be a really good defense. And if the offense can continue to be good, which I would think it would be, because anytime that Dak Prescott plays, the Cowboys have had the number 1 offense in the league in yards per game and points per game. I don't know if this is a Super Bowl team, but this is still a very good team in a pretty weak NFC.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's too early to be ruling anybody out of the Super Bowl. And
Yeah.
so I certainly think in the realm of the NFL, it's not outside the realm of possibility that a roster that looks like this could win the Super Bowl.
Absolutely not. I totally agree. All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you guys for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day. Now make your second listen to Locked On NFL podcast, where our national NFL experts and insiders keep fans dialed in with the biggest stories and the latest news from around the league, because an offseason doesn't equal a break in the action. Follow Locked On NFL every day on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts. All the same places that you would get the Locked On Cowboys podcast. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Cowboys. You can follow Landon at McCoolBCB. I am at Marcus_Mosher. We'll see you guys next time.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.